The wedding was, by all accounts, perfect. A vision, really. White roses cascaded from every archway, their scent mingling with the gentle hum of happy conversation and the crisp, clean air of early summer. My son David stood at the altar, beaming with a joy I hadn't seen on his face in years, his eyes fixed on Lila, who was radiant in lace. The band, a surprisingly good jazz ensemble, struck up the first slow dance, a classic, and I felt a familiar warmth spread through my chest, a quiet contentment that settles deep in your bones when you see your child truly happy. This was it, I thought. The culmination of dreams, the start of something beautiful. Then he appeared. My grandson, Milo, barely 7 years old, his bow tie askew as if he'd wrestled a small fluffy animal and lost. He was supposed to be with the other kids, probably raiding the dessert table, but instead he was there, tugging at my sleeve. Not a gentle pull, mind you, but a frantic, desperate yank that actually ripped the delicate lace on my cuff. "Grandma," he whispered, his voice a frantic little puff of air, his eyes wide as saucers, reflecting the twinkle lights around us like tiny, terrified stars. "You have to look under the table." Oh, how I wish I'd never bent down. I truly, deeply wish I had simply dismissed it as a child's game, a silly prank, or an overactive imagination. Because what I saw wasn't a forgotten toy car, or a dropped napkin, or even a runaway piece of cake. No, what I saw was the first domino, the very first in a long, devastating line that would, with agonizing slowness, topple every single happy memory we'd ever built, every illusion of peace and perfection we'd carefully constructed. One glance, one horrifying, heart-stopping moment, and the champagne instantly lost its celebratory fizz, turning to ash on my tongue. The violins, which moments before had sung such a sweet melody, seemed to screech off-key in my ears, a discordant soundtrack to my unraveling world. And my heart, bless its 68-year-old ticker, started running a panicked, desperate race it still hasn't quite finished. That night, under the guise of a joyous celebration, a secret, heavy and sharp, began to cut through the very fabric of our family. But let me back up a little, give you some context. My name is Ruth, and I'm 68 years young, though some days I feel 168. I've seen a bit of life, you could say. I've buried 2 good men, both taken too soon, and stared down breast cancer with a stubbornness that surprised even my doctors. More than anything, I raised 3 remarkable, if sometimes exasperating, kids on a teacher's salary, a feat I still consider my greatest triumph. My middle child, David, was the one getting married. He was marrying Lila, a sweet, bright-eyed girl who, during her very first Thanksgiving with us, had spent an entire afternoon patiently extracting my stuffing recipe, ingredient by painstaking ingredient. She even took notes. That, I decided then and there, was a keeper. The ceremony itself was held in the city's botanical garden, a place David and Lila had chosen with sentimental reverence. It was where their very first date had ended, not with a kiss under the stars, but with David slipping spectacularly on koi fish droppings near the lily pond. They'd laughed until they cried that night, a memory they often recounted with fond amusement. We always joked that if they could laugh through something so utterly unromantic and, frankly, a bit disgusting, they could surely laugh through anything life threw their way. It seemed like a solid foundation, built on genuine affection and a shared sense of humor. The reception, a shimmering glass greenhouse, was everything you'd imagine from a Pinterest board gone wild. Twinkle lights draped like constellations, orchids blooming in vibrant purples and whites, elegant floral arrangements that looked like they'd been plucked from a dream. It was beautiful, truly, a magical setting for a magical day. My grandson, Milo, David's son from his first brief marriage, was the ring bearer. He'd taken his role with utmost seriousness, practicing his strut for weeks, using our long hallway as his personal catwalk, a tiny, determined model in miniature formal wear. That morning, I'd kissed the top of his head, ruffled his perfectly combed hair, and told him he'd surely steal the show. I meant it too. He was adorable, a natural charmer. What I didn't know, what no one knew, was that he'd already stolen something far, far heavier than the spotlight. He'd inadvertently stumbled upon a secret, a burden he was far too small and far too young to carry alone. And he was about to lay it at my feet. Dinner had just been served, the clatter of silverware and the murmur of conversation filling the glass greenhouse with a convivial buzz. Guests had their choice of perfectly grilled salmon or a succulent steak, accompanied by an array of colorful, artfully arranged vegetables. Cheers echoed through the room, punctuated by the clinking of glasses as family and friends toasted the happy couple. The toasts, fueled by an open bar and an abundance of Prosecco, ran a little long, each speaker a little more effusive, a little more sentimental, a little more drunk on love and bubbly. Everyone, it seemed, was thoroughly enjoying themselves, lost in the celebratory atmosphere. Milo, however, had been uncharacteristically quiet. He sat beside me, poking at his mac and cheese shooters, a concession to the younger guests, served in elegant little glasses, with a miniature fork, his usual boisterous energy subdued. I'd attributed it to the late hour, perhaps a touch of overstimulation. Weddings, after all, are adult territory, full of long speeches and polite conversation, even for the most charming and resilient 7-year-olds. I thought he was just tired, maybe a little overwhelmed by all the grown-up fuss. My mind, bless its naive heart, was still swimming in the warm glow of the day, completely unprepared for the chilling plunge it was about to take. Then came the sleeve tug, that insistent, frantic pull that snapped me out of my pleasant reverie, and the whisper, that urgent, barely audible plea that sent a shiver down my spine, instantly replacing my contentment with a prickle of dread. "Under the table," he'd breathed, his tiny voice barely a tremor. It sounded, initially, like the beginning of a treasure hunt, a mischievous game, but the look in his eyes, those wide, innocent eyes, told a different story. His voice, usually so clear and bright, trembled. Not a child's playful tremble, but an adult tremble. The kind that speaks of fear, of something seen that simply cannot be unseen, a truth too big to hold. It was the sound of a child holding back tears, a child grappling with something far beyond his comprehension. My heart gave a sudden, uncomfortable lurch. I instinctively wiped my mouth with my napkin, stalling for a moment, trying to process the sudden shift in atmosphere. Then, feigning a dropped earring, a classic old lady maneuver, I suppose, I ducked beneath the crisp white linen tablecloth. The floor beneath the table was a chaotic maze of discarded stiletto heels, charger plates that had rolled off tables, and the occasional bouquet of forgotten flowers. It smelled faintly of spilled wine and rich food, a testament to the evening's festivities. And there, stark against the elegant backdrop, taped to the sturdy center pedestal of our round table, was a yellow envelope. My name, Ruth Ann Kinsley, was scrawled across it in a familiar looping handwriting, a handwriting I hadn't seen since 1989. Below my name, in bold, ominous letters, was a chilling addendum: "Do not open unless you want the truth." The blood in my veins turned to ice. My fingers, usually steady from years of grating papers and kneading dough, shook so violently I nearly tore the delicate paper of the envelope as I fumbled to open it. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat that seemed to echo the silence that had suddenly descended upon my world, even amidst the ongoing revelry of the wedding. Inside, nestled amongst what felt like a lifetime of unspoken words, were 2 photographs. The first was a faded Polaroid, instantly recognizable as our old kitchen. David, a gangly 17-year-old, his hair falling boyishly across his forehead, was caught in an embrace, kissing a girl. She was pretty, with a cascade of dark, curly hair and a shy smile, but definitively not Lila. A pang of recognition, sharp and unwelcome, shot through me. Marissa, David's high school girlfriend. My mind raced, trying to place the context, the memory. It felt like a lifetime ago, a chapter long closed and forgotten. The second photograph was a jarring contrast, a modern print that spoke of more recent, more painful truths. It showed that same girl, Marissa, visibly pregnant, her hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. She stood beside David, who looked pale and utterly overwhelmed, in what was clearly a hospital corridor. The timestamp, stark and unforgiving in the bottom corner, read 6 months after he'd left for college. 6 months. A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach, twisting tighter with each beat of my frantic heart. And then, the final cruel twist. Taped to the back of the second photo was a small yellow sticky note. The handwriting was different this time, a neat, precise script that I didn't recognize. It simply said, "Ask him about Connor." My stomach lurched violently into my throat, a wave of nausea washing over me. Connor. The name hit me like a physical blow. Connor was Milo's middle name, our family name, passed down through generations from my own great-grandfather, a revered patriarch. It was a name steeped in tradition and family legacy. And now, It was irrevocably linked to this devastating secret. I stuffed the photos back into the envelope, my hands trembling uncontrollably, the paper rustling like dry leaves. My heart hammered so loudly, so desperately, I was convinced the saxophonist, now launching into a lively jazz solo, would hear its frantic rhythm over his music. When I finally managed to compose myself enough to emerge from under the table, blinking in the bright lights, Milo was still there, standing sentinel. His lip was quivering, his small face etched with a fear that mirrored my own. "I found them in Daddy's suit pocket," he mouthed, his voice barely a breath. He said they were old, but he looked scared. Scared. My 40-year-old son, a man I thought I knew inside and out, terrified of a few pieces of paper. The irony wasn't lost on me. The weight of his secret had been too much even for him, and now it was mine to bear. You really need context to understand the depth of this betrayal, the sheer weight of what those photos implied. David, my middle child, was always the gentle one, the kid who cried when butterflies landed on him, not out of fear, but out of a profound, almost painful empathy. He was oversensitive, easily wounded, and utterly allergic to confrontation. He'd sooner walk over hot coals than intentionally hurt someone, or so I believed. This innate gentleness, while endearing, often made him a target, and it certainly shaped his relationships. His first serious girlfriend, Marissa, had clung to him like static cling, a shadow that never quite detached. They dated all through senior year of high school, a sweet, puppy love romance that seemed harmless enough. She was a quiet girl, a little intense, and completely devoted to David. When he decided to go out of state for college, a decision that tore at his gentle heart, their relationship, predictably, fractured. I remember comforting Marissa on our front porch, the summer air thick with the scent of honeysuckle and her heartbroken sobs. She'd cried into my shoulder, convinced that distance couldn't kill a love as strong as theirs. I, in my well-meaning maternal wisdom, had offered platitudes about young love and new beginnings, believing wholeheartedly that this was just a phase, a necessary rite of passage. 2 months later, David met Lila at orientation. He called me, practically giddy, telling me about this amazing girl who made him laugh, who understood his quirky sense of humor. I thought, with a sigh of relief, that Marissa was ancient history, a bittersweet memory from a simpler time. I truly believed that chapter was closed, neatly filed away in the archives of youthful romance. Apparently, history has a cruel way of repeating itself, often with far bigger, far more devastating consequences. The photos in that yellow envelope didn't just suggest David had rekindled something with Marissa, they implied he had never truly ended it. Or at the very least, that he had carried a profound secret from that time. A secret that had, quite literally, come to life. A child. And who knew? My mind spiraled. If there was just one. If the baby in the hospital had survived, could there have been others? The thought was a sickening, dizzying descent into a rabbit hole of deceit, and the cruelest irony of all. He'd named my grandson, my innocent, sweet Milo, after that very secret. Connor. A ghost label. A whispered reminder of a hidden life, haunting every birthday banner, every family gathering. The name, once a symbol of continuity and heritage, now felt like a brand of shame, a constant silent accusation. The sudden tap of the microphone brought me crashing back to the present, shattering the fragile shell of my composure. "Ladies and gentlemen," the master of ceremonies boomed, his voice jovial and booming. "The mother of the groom." A wave of applause, enthusiastic and well-meaning, washed over me, but it felt distant, muffled, as if I were underwater. My heart was still hammering, a frantic, desperate rhythm that seemed to mock the celebratory beat of the music. I stood on autopilot, my champagne flute feeling strangely heavy, slippery with a fine sheen of sweat that wasn't from the warmth of the greenhouse. My carefully prepared speech, a collection of standard, heartfelt sentiments, felt like a foreign language on my tongue. "Welcome to the family, Lila," I'd practiced. "We're so proud of David. Remember to laugh through life's challenges." Every syllable, every well-intentioned word, tasted like sawdust, dry and bitter. It felt like a performance, a grotesque charade I was forced to enact, while my entire world teetered on the brink of collapse. My eyes, betraying my internal turmoil, scanned the crowd, searching for something, anything, to ground me. Over the sea of smiling faces, I saw David's, rosy with joy, triumphant in his love, completely oblivious to the ticking time bomb I held in my hand. Lila, radiant and glowing, beamed up at him, her happiness so pure it almost hurt to witness. And then Milo, my sweet, unwitting accomplice, was tugging at the tablecloth, a small, restless gesture that in my heightened state felt like he was trying to yank the entire evening, the entire fragile illusion, into oblivion. I managed to reach the end of my speech, my voice a strained, brittle thing. To new beginnings, I concluded, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. But my voice, betraying the lie, cracked unmistakably on the word new, a small, almost imperceptible fissure in the carefully constructed facade. People blessed their inebriated hearts, clapped anyway, their cheers a hollow echo in my ears. As I sat back down, the weight of my deceit pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. I had just lied, outright and unequivocally, to a roomful of loved ones, to my family, to my new daughter-in-law. Beginnings are only clean, I realized with a sickening clarity, when you sweep the past under the rug, or, in this case, under the table. Right there, where the yellow envelope waited, a silent, menacing presence, like a ticking heart, ready to explode. The taste of champagne had turned to ash, the violins to a screech, and the perfect wedding was now nothing more than a stage for a rapidly unfolding tragedy. The moment I could, when the dessert course was being cleared and the dance floor began to fill, I motioned David towards the corridor just outside the greenhouse. It was a narrow, dimly lit passage, strung with delicate fairy lights that, in that moment, cast long, distorted shadows, like jail bars across the polished floor. The whimsical lighting, meant to add to the romantic ambiance, now felt ominous, trapping us in a scene of impending doom. I didn't waste words. My hand, still trembling slightly, reached into my purse and produced the yellow envelope. I thrust it into his hand, watching his face intently. The color drained from his cheeks faster than champagne flutes emptied at the open bar. His usually confident posture slumped, his shoulders hunching as if under an invisible weight. "Where did you get this?" he hissed, his voice raw with a mixture of fear and accusation, his eyes wide and panicked. The gentle, loving groom of moments ago had vanished, replaced by a desperate, cornered man. My voice, surprisingly steady, was a stark contrast to his rising panic. "Your son found it," I answered, my gaze unwavering, holding his. His eyes, frantic and wild, darted instinctively towards the glass wall of the greenhouse, searching for Milo, his fear now pure animalistic terror. He saw Milo, happily dancing with one of the bridesmaids, completely oblivious, and a wave of relief, quickly followed by renewed dread, washed over his features. "It's old, Mom. Ancient," he stammered, trying to dismiss it, to wave away the undeniable evidence. His words were weak, unconvincing, even to himself. "Ancient doesn't wear a hospital bracelet dated 2009, I retorted, my voice sharp, cutting through his pathetic attempts at denial. The truth, stark and unyielding, hung in the air between us. He leaned heavily against the cool glass wall, slowly sliding down until his perfectly tailored tucks bunched around his hips like crushed napkins, his once immaculate appearance now mirroring his shattered composure. He looked utterly defeated, a man brought to his knees by his own lies. His confession, when it finally came, was a barely audible whisper, wrung from him like drops of blood. "Marissa lost the baby. We were kids. I thought I could outrun it." He clave to the excuse of youth, of inexperience, as if it could absolve him of a decade of deceit. I waited. I waited for the guilt, the shame, the profound regret to morph into an apology, a sincere plea for forgiveness for the years of lies, for the child lost and hidden, for the pain he was about to inflict. Instead, what emerged was a desperate, self-pitying plea. If Lila finds out today, she'll leave me. So will Milo. In that precise moment, a wave of pure, unadulterated hatred washed over me. Not for David, my son, my gentle boy, but for the man he had become. For his monumental selfishness. He had made his betrayal, his profound act of deceit, entirely about his own abandonment, fears, his own desperate need to avoid consequences. He hadn't uttered a single word about Lila's pain, about the trust he had shattered, about the secret child, the lost life. He was only concerned with his own comfort, his own future. It was a cold, hard truth, and it solidified my resolve. He pleaded, he begged, his voice hoarse and desperate, his eyes wide with a terror that was almost pitiable. "Just bury it, Mom," he whimpered, clutching at my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. At least until the honeymoon ends. 2 weeks, Mom. Please, just pretend you never looked. His words were a desperate scramble for time, a pathetic attempt to postpone the inevitable, to cling to the last vestiges of his carefully constructed illusion. As he spoke, my mind, in a cruel trick of memory, flashed back through decades of motherhood. I remembered the long, terrifying nights I'd paced his bedroom, his small body racked with croup, each gasp for air a dagger to my own heart. I remembered the hours I'd spent hunched over algebra textbooks, relearning quadratic equations just so I could tutor him, patiently guiding him through concepts that felt utterly alien to me. I remembered the countless overtime shifts I'd pulled, the extra hours I'd worked, sacrificing my own comfort so he could go on that college tour, the very tour that had, unbeknownst to me, set the stage for this terrible secret. Every sacrifice, every moment of maternal devotion now felt tainted, cheapened by this colossal lie. But then, another image rose unbidden to my mind. Lila's father, his face etched with pride and a father's protective love, as he'd looked at David during the rehearsal dinner, his voice low and earnest. "Take care of my girl," he'd said, a simple plea that carried the weight of a lifetime of devotion. In that moment, I felt both mothers inside me, the fiercely protective mother of my son and the equally fierce, newly awakened protector of the woman who was now, by marriage, my daughter. The conflict raged, a silent, brutal battle within my soul. My resolve, wavering for a split second, hardened. "You have until the send-off brunch," I stated, my voice firm, leaving no room for negotiation. "That's it? Then you tell her, or I do." The ultimatum hung in the air, heavy and unyielding. He nodded, a single jerky movement, his eyes still wide with fear, but a flicker of understanding, of grudging acceptance, crossing his face. He wiped a stray tear, or perhaps snot, on the monogrammed cuff of his pristine shirt, a pathetic gesture that somehow made him seem even more childlike, more vulnerable. Then, with a visible effort, he straightened his tie, took a deep, shuddering breath, and forced a semblance of composure back onto his face. We walked back into the glittering greenhouse, the transition from raw, emotional confrontation to celebratory revelry feeling jarring, almost surreal. As if on cue, the magnificent wedding cake arrived, a towering confection of 5 tiers, adorned with sugared gardenias that looked almost too perfect to eat. David and Lila, playing their roles to perfection, approached the cake. Their hands guided together to slice the first piece. They smeared frosting playfully onto each other's dimples, a picture-perfect moment for the cameras that flashed incessantly. Milo, bless his innocent heart, clapped along with the rest of the guests, completely unaware that he had just witnessed and inadvertently instigated the first act of a tragedy that would irrevocably alter the course of all our lives. The sweetness of the cake, the joy of the moment, felt like a bitter mockery of the truth festering beneath the surface. The rest of the evening unfolded in a blur of forced smiles and strained gaiety. I danced twice, a meager attempt to blend in, to appear normal. Once with Milo, who stood on my shoes, his tiny hands gripping mine as we shuffled clumsily across the dance floor. His infectious giggles a momentary balm to my aching heart. And then again, with my married daughter, Sarah, who, ever perceptive, looked at me with concern. "Mom," she asked, her brow furrowed, "why are your hands ice cold?" I quickly concocted a plausible lie, blaming the overzealous air conditioning, a flimsy excuse that she, bless her heart, seemed to accept. As midnight approached, the guests began to dwindle, their energy slowly fading. Shoes came off, discarded under tables, ties were loosened and slung casually over shoulders, a sign of weary contentment. The air grew thick with the lingering scent of perfume, spilled wine, and fading revelry. David, however, seemed unable to slow down. He kept refilling his champagne flute, his eyes growing increasingly glassy, his laughter a little too loud, a little too forced. He hovered on the edge of confession, I could tell, his gaze darting to Lila, then to me, then away again, a silent battle raging behind his eyes. But the music, still pulsing with a relentless beat, swelled louder than his courage, drowning out any nascent impulse to unburden himself. Lila, blissfully ignorant, laughed at every one of his jokes, her face glowing with an innocent happiness that was both beautiful and heartbreaking to witness. She leaned into him, her hand resting trustingly on his arm, completely unaware of the chasm that was about to open beneath her feet. At 1:15 a.m., the sparklers were brought out, handed to the remaining guests for the grand exit. A shimmering tunnel of silver light formed outside the greenhouse, a dazzling farewell for the newlyweds. I held Milo on my hip, his small body heavy with sleep and sugar, as David and Lila ran through the sparkling archway, bathed in the ephemeral glow, their getaway car waiting to whisk them off to their airport hotel. It was a picture-perfect moment, a cinematic ending to a story that, unbeknownst to them, was just beginning its darkest chapter. Lila, laughing joyfully, threw her bouquet over her shoulder. In a strange twist of fate, or perhaps a cruel irony, it landed directly at my feet. Everyone cheered, assuming it was a sign of good luck, a passing of the torch. I bent down, picking up the fragrant cluster of white roses, and tucked a single stem behind Milo's ear. "We'll fix this," I whispered into his hair, a promise I wasn't sure I could keep, a desperate attempt to reassure myself as much as him. He buried his face deeper into my neck, his cheeks sticky with what I realized were frosting tears. A sweet and tragic residue of the night's false joy. Around us, the sparklers fizzed out, leaving behind a faint acrid smell. It smelled, to me, like burnt promises. The morning after, it dawned bright and deceptively cheerful, casting a golden glow over the sunlit patio where the send-off brunch was held. A lavish waffle bar, laden with every topping imaginable, beckoned guests. The bridal party, a collection of hungover but still glamorous figures, arrived slowly, most of them sporting oversized sunglasses, sipping strong coffee, and nursing the lingering effects of the open bar. I was there too, still in the same dress from the night before, its delicate fabric now a roadmap of wrinkles, a topographic map of a sleepless night spent wrestling with a secret too heavy to bear alone. My mind raced, anticipating the confrontation, the inevitable explosion. David arrived solo, a fact that immediately set my nerves on edge. Lila, he explained curtly, was still upstairs, packing for Greece, blissfully unaware that her dream honeymoon was about to be shattered before it even began. As coffee was poured and polite, strained conversation circulated, David pulled me aside, his face pale and drawn, his eyes bloodshot from a night of restless anxiety, or perhaps too much champagne. "I can't," he whispered, his voice cracking, barely audible above the gentle clinking of silverware. "She'll never forgive me." The words were a cowardly plea, a desperate abdication of responsibility. I searched his face, desperately trying to find a flicker of the boy who used to confess when he stole cookies from the jar, his eyes wide with a mixture of guilt and a plea for absolution. That boy, the one who understood the simple weight of right and wrong, was gone, replaced by a man paralyzed by fear. "Then I will," I replied, my voice steady, resolute. The decision, though agonizing, had been made. Someone had to speak the truth, and if he couldn't, I would. He grabbed my wrist, his grip surprisingly strong, hard enough to bruise, a desperate, controlling gesture. "You'll destroy her," he hissed, his eyes blazing with a desperate fury. "You'll destroy her life." "You already did," I said, my voice cold, shaking free of his grasp. The words hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. With a sense of grim determination, I stepped onto the terrace. Lila emerged then, a vision in a vibrant yellow sundress, her hair braided intricately, making her look like a carefree girl on a juice box commercial. She smiled, a radiant, innocent smile, still basking in the glow of her wedding day. She looked confused, seeing David's raw red eyes, the tension that crackled between us. The entire terrace, though still abuzz with the muted chatter of the brunch, seemed to fall silent around us, a sudden eerie hush. That's when I learned, truly learned, that pain has a sound. It's not a scream, or a sob, or a shout. It's the sharp, devastating click of a life snapping shut. A sound that, once heard, you can never unhear. She didn't scream. That was the most shocking part. She didn't dissolve into tears, or lash out in a fit of righteous fury, or even demand answers with a raised voice. Instead, Lila listened. She stood there, regal and impossibly calm in her bright yellow sundress, her face a mask of quiet devastation, nodding slowly, almost imperceptibly, like a diligent student absorbing impossible math. Her eyes, however, betrayed the inner turmoil, shifting from David's shame-filled face to mine, then back again, a silent plea for clarification, for understanding of this sudden, brutal assault on her reality. When David finally finished his halting, self-serving confession, his voice raw and broken, a fragile whisper escaped Lila's lips. It wasn't a question of fact, but a question of presence, of a ghost that had just materialized. "Does Marissa still live here?" she whispered, her gaze sweeping over the beautiful, sunlit patio, as if expecting the specter of David's past to emerge from behind a potted palm. David, predictably, shook his head, unable to meet her gaze. "Then why?" she continued, her voice gaining a chilling clarity. "Does it feel like she's at our table?" The question hung in the air, a potent accusation, a testament to the pervasive nature of his secret. It wasn't just a lie about a past event. It was a lie that now permeated their shared present, their future, their very union. Without another word, her shoulders squared, a newfound rigidity in her posture. She turned and walked inside the greenhouse, leaving David crumpled in his chair. He followed her, a pathetic, defeated figure, his once crisp tux now a symbol of his shattered life. I stayed outside, feeling like an intruder, an unwanted witness to their final, private moments before everything irrevocably changed. The silence that followed was heavy, punctuated only by the distant clatter of brunch plates and the chirping of birds, completely unaware of the human drama unfolding. 20 minutes later, a lifetime in that tense silence, Lila reappeared. She held her passport firmly in her hand, a small tangible symbol of her independence, her escape. "I'm going to Greece alone," she declared, her voice clear and steady, devoid of tears, but laced with an icy resolve that sent shivers down my spine. "When I come back, be gone." David, who had followed her out, tried to speak, to plead, to offer some desperate 11th-hour negotiation. But she simply lifted a hand, a gesture so final, so absolute, that even the birds in the surrounding trees seemed to obey, falling silent. My son, the groom of yesterday, crumpled back onto a wicker chair, looking utterly broken. His wedding band, a symbol of eternal commitment, caught the morning sunlight, flashing like a signal flare. A desperate plea for help that would go unanswered. Family members nearby, masters of the subtle art of passive observation, pretended not to watch, their eyes discreetly averted, yet absorbing every syllable, every nuance, for future retelling, for the inevitable dissection that would follow. I, the unwitting catalyst, the reluctant truth-teller, paid the brunch bill, the numbers on the receipt blurring before my eyes. I hugged Lila goodbye, a tight, desperate embrace, whispering hollow promises to her parents that we'd sort this out. Their eyes, filled with a mixture of sorrow and barely concealed anger, said they doubted it. But manners, those fragile social constructs, held their weapons sheathed for now. The wedding, once a symbol of new beginnings, had become an explosive ending. The annulment came swiftly, within the month, a stark, legalistic end to a marriage that had barely begun. The speed of it was shocking, but then again, what was there to salvage when the foundation was built on such a monumental lie? Lila, with a quiet determination that both impressed and saddened me, moved to Seattle, seeking a fresh start, a new geography to match her shattered interior landscape. David, meanwhile, rented a small claustrophobic studio apartment, its air perpetually thick with the smell of mildew and the pervasive suffocating odor of regret. He slept on a mattress on the floor, his life stripped bare, a physical manifestation of his emotional desolation. Milo, caught in the cruel crossfire of adult deception, became a child of two homes, splitting his weeks between his mother's new apartment and his father's temporary melancholic dwelling. He quickly learned the unspoken rules of this new, fractured existence, becoming adept at packing a small go bag, always ready for the next transition, a silent testament to his resilience and the quiet sorrow he carried. I, in turn, became the neutral ground, the steady anchor in a sea of upheaval. Park Saturdays, ice cream Wednesdays, therapy speak before first grade. These became the new routines, my way of providing some semblance of normalcy, some consistent love, in a world that had suddenly become anything but normal. One evening, as we sat on the porch swing, watching the fireflies blink in the twilight, Milo, with the innocent directness only a child can possess, asked, "Why did Daddy cry at the wedding, Grandma?" My heart ached. I paused, searching for words that would be both truthful and gentle. "Sometimes, Sweet Pea," I told him, holding him close, "grown-ups carry secrets, and sometimes those secrets are heavier than kids can carry, and they make grown-ups cry." He accepted this explanation with a quiet nod, like he accepted the changing weather, his young mind already more attuned to impermanence than most adults. David, drowning in his despair, lost his job. Too many sick days, Too many hours spent staring at ceilings, lost in a fog of self-pity and what-ifs. His career, once promising, crumbled alongside his personal life. Then, Marissa resurfaced. Not in person, but on the relentless, ever-present landscape of social media. Her profile, once dormant, bloomed with curated beach photos, accompanied by chirpy hashtags like Namar self-love and healing. There was no mention, not a single word, of the baby, of Connor. A cold, unsettling curiosity gnawed at me. I found myself, late one night, fingers flying across my laptop keyboard, searching through online obituaries from that year, 2009, and there it was. A 2-line notice, almost an afterthought, buried deep in the digital archives. Infant Connor Marissa Lee, returned to Angels 2009. No funeral details, no loving eulogy, just a stark, clinical announcement. I closed the laptop, the screen reflecting my own tear-streaked face. The grief, delayed by over a decade, arrived then, sharp and sudden, like the bitter tang of citrus. It was a grief not just for the lost child, but for the lost innocence, the lost truth, the lost years of what might have been. A full year later, a year that felt like a decade, measured in emotional turmoil, David knocked at my door. He looked different. His beard, once unkempt and signaling his despair, was now neatly trimmed, a conscious effort at self-care. More importantly, his eyes, once clouded with fear and self-pity, were steadier, clearer, holding a nascent glint of resolve. "I'm going to meetings," he said, his voice quiet but firm. He didn't elaborate, didn't need to. I knew what he meant. Therapy, perhaps AA, maybe both. Whatever it was working. He was actively trying to put himself back together. He asked if he could take Milo for the weekend. I hesitated, a protective instinct flaring. Had he truly changed? Could I trust him with Milo? With the fragile peace we had painstakingly built? He must have seen the doubt in my eyes, because he quickly added, his voice earnest. I told him the whole story, Mom. Age level, of course. Everything. My breath caught in my throat. This was it, the true reckoning. The moment he stepped up, truly owned his past. We sat on the porch swing, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows. Milo was happily drawing chalk galaxies on the sidewalk, his small universe expanding under his creative hand, blissfully unaware of the profound conversation unfolding just a few feet away. "Do you hate me?" David asked, his voice barely a whisper, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon, unable to meet my eyes. I considered the question, letting the silence stretch, punctuated only by the insistent buzzing chorus of August cicadas. It was a complex question, one that demanded an honest, nuanced answer. "I hate what you did," I finally said, my voice soft but clear. "I hate the lies, the pain, the destruction you caused. I love who you were, the gentle, earnest boy I raised. But honestly, David, I don't know who you are now, not completely." He nodded, a slow, deliberate movement, accepting my parole, understanding that trust, once shattered, is not easily rebuilt. Before he left with Milo, a hesitant, hopeful smile playing on his son's face, David handed me another sealed envelope. Same familiar yellow, same looping handwriting as the first. My heart gave a familiar, uncomfortable lurch. But this time, it wasn't a bomb. Inside, I found a letter, a long, sprawling 4-page apology addressed to Lila, one he'd clearly written in the depths of his despair, but had never found the courage to send. "If she ever asks," he said, his voice imbued with a new humility, "if she ever wants to know, I'm give her this." I tucked it carefully into my old wooden recipe box, nestled between yellowed index cards for my famous banana bread and my comforting beef stew. Ancestral knowledge mixed with modern failure, a testament to the messy, complicated tapestry of family life. It was a strange kind of hope, a fragile thread connecting a broken past to an uncertain future. Milo is 8 now, a whirlwind of boundless energy, and an unexpected obsession with origami. His small, nimble fingers, once fumbling with mac and cheese shooters, now deftly fold tiny paper cranes. They perch on my mantle like a flock of delicate white flags, each one a silent prayer, a quiet hope for peace. He's growing, thriving, a bright spark in our lives, and he's learning to navigate his fractured family with the wisdom that belies his tender years. David, slowly but steadily, has rebuilt parts of his life. He found a steady job teaching computer basics at the community center, a role that suits his gentle nature and analytical mind. He's found a quiet kind of redemption in helping others, in the steady rhythm of work and routine. He still calls, still visits, still works on rebuilding the bridges he so carelessly burned. Lila, ever the free spirit, sends postcards. Santorini sunsets, bustling Seattle coffee shops, windswept beaches in Portugal. Never the same place twice, always a new adventure. We exchange polite texts on birthdays, brief cordial messages that speak of distance and a carefully maintained civility. There's no bitterness, no overt anger, just a quiet understanding that some things, once broken, can never be fully mended. Her journey, I realize, is one of self-discovery, of finding her own path unburdened by David's deceit. The glass greenhouse, the scene of such profound joy and devastating revelation, has hosted 3 more weddings since ours. I avoid driving past it now, the sight of it still conjuring a visceral clench in my stomach, a phantom ache in my chest. Some nights, when the house is quiet and sleep eludes me, I still see that yellow envelope, taped so innocently beneath the table. I can almost feel the cool, crisp linen brushing against my cheek, like the curtain of a confession booth, hiding secrets. I wake with the phantom taste of sugar flowers and the bitter tang of regret on my tongue. Milo, with his childlike curiosity, once asked if we could return to the glass house with sparklers. My heart ached again, a familiar pang. I held him close. Memories, I told him, trying to articulate a complex truth in simple terms, are like homes. Sweet pea. Sometimes you can't revisit them, not exactly, but you can always rebuild nearby, create new ones just as beautiful. He accepted this too, with the quiet understanding that children often possess. They grasp impermanence, the fleeting nature of things, far better than adults do. They just lack the vocabulary for grief, for the deep, complex sorrow that comes with such understanding. But they feel it just as keenly. So when people wax poetic about weddings being happy endings, the glorious culmination of a love story, I can't help but laugh, a quiet, bitter little laugh that catches in my throat. They're not endings, I've learned. They're prologues, blank pages, pristine and hopeful, where families inadvertently begin to write footnotes that, over time, become entire, sprawling, complicated chapters. My grandson, in his innocent 7-year-old wisdom, thought he was showing me a hidden treasure, a secret prize beneath the table. In reality, he was handing me the key to a locked room in our carefully constructed house of cards, a room filled with dust and long-buried truths. I could have stayed seated. I could have ignored his frantic whisper, let the cake remain sweet on my tongue, allowed the music to swell and wash over me, leaving me in blissful ignorance. But love, true, profound love for my family, demands truth. Even when that truth tastes like copper, metallic and sharp, leaving a bitter residue. My lesson, hard won and etched deep into my soul, is this. If you ever find yourself beneath twinkle lights, your hands trembling, holding an envelope that doesn't belong, an uncomfortable truth suddenly thrust upon you, stand up, speak. Don't let fear or social decorum silence you, because secrets, when kept, don't just fester, they grow teeth. They become monstrous, insatiable things, and the bite, the inevitable, agonizing bite, always lands on the next generation. It falls on the innocent, the unsuspecting, the children who deserve a foundation built on honesty, not on shifting sands of deceit. I wish, with every fiber of my being, that I had never looked under that table. The pain, the fallout, the unraveling of everything I thought I knew was immense. But I am profoundly, fiercely glad that I stood up from it. And if David, in the unpredictable dance of life, ever decides to marry again, I'll be there, not clutching an envelope, not burdened by secrets, but holding only a champagne flute, ready to offer a toast that says, with all the wisdom and weariness of my years, may your future be as honest as your past was long. Until then, I fold paper cranes with Milo, each delicate crease a small, silent prayer. May the next secret, wherever it may be, choose somewhere else to hide, somewhere far, far away from the innocent eyes of a child. If you've ever carried a family bombshell, a secret that threatened to shatter everything, tell me how you handled it. Comment below. Don't forget to like, share your own sparkler stories, and subscribe for more raw truth.